Hello there and welcome to my guide for painting the Star Wars Shatterpoint Appetite for Destruction squad pack. As you can see, I've sprayed the battle droids black and I've also kept two of them off their base for ease of painting, and the others I've sprayed with matte white. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to mix some contrast medium with some Creed camo, and I'm going to put the first layer in. Now I'm going to keep layering this thing for about 4 or 5 layers to really sort of emphasize the color and get some nice shading and highlights in there. And in between each of those coats, I'm going to start painting the battle droids with some Iron Hand steel. They'll then get a contrast medium mix with some Basil Canum grey all over all of the miniatures. While you're doing those, don't forget to keep adding a few layers to the command droid. He should end up looking something like this. That's about 4 or 5 layers. Once the battle droids are dry, we're going to use a dry brush and we're going to reapply some Iron Hand steel all over all of the miniatures. Once we've done that, we're then going to do another dry brush, but this time with some Stormhost silver, once again all over the miniatures, and this is to help pick out all those details. We'll then apply some Mephiston red on their little light on their chest and on their eyes as well. And this will be followed by some Evil Sunz Scarlet, then some Wild Rider red, and then the tiniest of tiny dots of matte white for the center of the light. With the battle droids out of the way, we're going to move back to the command droid and we're going to use some Nurgling green to dry brush everywhere. Try not to drop him like I nearly did, so take your time and be nice and gentle with him. Next, we're going to mix a little bit of matte white to the Nurgling green for about a 50-50 mix, and then we're going to dry brush everything again, just picking out those final details. We're then going to move on to the metal. I'm going to use some Iron Hand steel to start marking in all the areas what that will be metallic. If you're unsure where, just look up some reference photos on Google. I'll also do the same for General Grievous, but I will use some Iron Warriors instead, so we've got a much darker metallic look. I'm then going to use Iron Hand steel to paint all the hilts of the lightsabers that General Grievous is holding. I'm then going to move to General Grievous' cloak, and I'm going to use Corvus black to paint all of the backside of the cloak. All of the metallics will then receive a coat of Nuln oil. Once that wash is dry, we're then going to use some Stormhost silver to highlight all the Iron Hand steel sections on both the Commander and General Grievous. Then we're going to highlight all the edges of the Iron Warriors on General Grievous with some Iron Hand steel. I'm then going to use some Corvus grey mixed with some Eshin grey for a 50-50 mix to start highlighting General Grievous' cloak. Then just Eshin grey for the next layer highlight. And finally, for the sort of very tip and edge of his cloak, I'm going to mix in a tiny bit of Mechanicus Standard Grey to the Eshin Grey, about a 50-50 mix, just to start highlighting that sort of rough looking back part. I'm then going to use Retributor Armour to paint the gold details on the Commander. There are some on his legs and his arms as well. And this will be given a wash of Reichland Flesh Shade. I'm then going to use some Mephiston red to paint the inside of General Grievous' cloak while that wash dries. And I'm also going to use Mephiston red to paint the flesh behind his mask as well. Moving back to the Commander, we're going to use some Auric Armour Gold to highlight all the gold areas we've just washed. Then we're going to use some Agrax Earthshade to paint the underside of General Grievous' cloak. And then I'll use some Crimson Carroburg for the flesh on his face. The Droid Commander's eyes will be painted with some Avalan Sunset, followed up by a tiny little dot of Flash Gets Yellow. I'm then going to use Abandoned Black to paint the Commander's weapon. I'm then going to move back to the underside of General Grievous' cloak, which I'm going to dry brush with a 50-50 mix of Mephiston red and Evil Sunz Scarlet. Then Evil Sunz Scarlet just by itself. Then a 50-50 mix of Evil Sunz Scarlet and Wild Rider red. Until finally Wild Rider Red just by itself. I'm then going to use Avalanche Sunset to paint his eyes. And then I'll use a tiny dot of Abaddon Black just to mark his pupils. Wraithbone will then be used to paint all the armour that General Grievous is wearing, which will be given a very thin shade of Army Painter soft tone. I'm then going to go back to Wraithbone to tidy up that wash, followed by the first set of highlights of Wraithbone mixed with some matte white for a 50-50 mix. And then I'll mix in some more matte white for a 70-30 mix in favour of matte white for the second and final highlight. I'm then going to highlight the command droid's weapon with some Corvus black. Then I'll paint two of General Grievous's lightsabers with some Temple Guard blue, followed by a 50-50 mix of Temple Guard blue and Baroth blue for the first highlight. Then Baroth blue just by itself for the second. And for the final highlight, a 50-50 mix of Baroth blue and some matte white. His green lightsaber will be painted with some moot green, followed by a 50-50 mix of moot green and matte white. And then I'll add a little bit more matte white to create a 30-70 mix. The droid commander is standing on a chunk of metal, so I'm going to paint that with Iron Warriors. The base plate at the bottom I'm going to paint with Abaddon Black. This will then get a coat of Nuln Oil. And while that dries, I'll start painting the muddy areas on the bases with some XV88. I'm also going to build up the muddy area onto a little bit of the statue where Grievous is standing. Then the concrete areas will get painted with Dawnstone Grey, as will the statue that General Grievous is standing on. I'm then going to use Tau Light Ochre to edge highlight all of the XV88 and the mud areas. The concrete will be edge highlighted with some Grey Sear. And the statue will be dry brushed with some Grey Sear, followed by a 50-50 mix of Grey Sear and matte white. I'll then use Grey Sear to paint the symbol on the command droid's base, which will be highlighted with some matte white. The Iron Warriors will be highlighted with some Iron Hand Steel. The bases will be painted with some Abaddon Black. And then all the bases will get washed with some watered down Agrax Earthshade. Once that base is dry, there you have it. There's General Grievous and the droids. I really like this set. I think it's an absolutely phenomenal set. That General Grievous is truly, truly beautiful. This is a nice, fast, fun set to paint and only took around about 7 hours. I really hope if you followed this guide, you found it helpful, and if you did, give it a thumbs up, give me a subscribe, and well, hopefully I will see you next time. Goodbye for now.